Good morning, afternoon, good day. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Coffee with Friends. As a reminder, before we get started, the guests on our live streams reflect a diverse set of values, morals, and ethics that may not reflect the morals, values, and ethics of the Misfit Amish. Coffee with Friends may also discuss trauma of all sorts to include all types of abuse. Viewers and listeners may find it unsettling and triggering. And if this live stream causes you distress, please cease listening until you're able to listen again. You may also seek support from your trusted folks and qualified mental health professionals as needed. And with that being said, welcome to the show. And I'd like to welcome Kristen today. Hi, Kristen. How are
I
you?
I am full of jitters and excitement.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. So I found Mary and this channel through an interview that you did with Coastal Consciousness and was so um impressed and just like, wow, I'm gonna follow this person. And I started following with you and engaging. And I said, oh, Mary's my kind of fierce. And we had a lot in common for having such very different growing up backgrounds. And
Mm-hmm.
um, about a year ago, I was like, oh, I'm going to start a channel. Some life things happened. We had a loss in the family and things. And so I kind of put things off for a while, but decided, yeah, I'm ready to come back and do this. And I the purpose of my doing this, I think it's a good place to kind of start with your intentions, like why you share your stories, why you do your thing. And I'm a therapist now. I see kids, adults, couples, families. I do all of those things. I also specialize in trauma. And the interesting thing about that, we'll get more into that. I'm going to weave some tidbits about trauma through my stories to kind of make those connections. Because I think a lot of people don't understand or see the things that they've been through as trauma. And the reality is, trauma is a biological change in the brain. We know that now. We have science to support it. I think sometimes therapy or mental health in general gets this sort of perception that, like, we're just sort of making stuff up and it's touchy feely. And, like, nope, this is science. Science is, measurable, right? We can
Uh-huh.
see what is happening. I think sometimes people, depending on where they come from, have a fear of science, right? But science is really at its root just about observation and being able to prove things, right, to the best of our human ability. So the things that I will talk about today have to do with being backed by that. So I'm not, talking out my
Yes.
rear. Does
And
that
to
make
be
sense?
clear, I also want to throw this out there for the
Yeah.
people who have issues with, like, the one thing about science that I've always appreciated is that
Mhm.
it's whenever somebody does a scientific study, it has to have the capacity to be reproduced.
Yes.
And
Peer reviewed.
as as we go through the scientific process of understanding ourselves better, understanding the human experience better, and understanding trauma better, what will happen is what we know is going to change because when we know more, the hypothetical now hypothesis behind can evolve to ask better questions, and then that can in essence create change that now we know. Okay, like 50 years ago we didn't know all of the things we know about trauma. Did we know 50 years ago that trauma was a biological process?
No, and we called it different things, right? If you look back far enough, when people would have different mental health issues, crisis, trauma, right, or a condition, we thought it was a condition of the spirit, right? Or the soul, or demonic, things like that. And I know that still ends up in some people's practice today, when the reality is we can prove this is where it's happening, why it's happening, and when somebody has XYZ treatment, it's better, right?
Uh-huh.
So that's, that's not about belief structure. That's just about what is happening and the result you see from applying something, right? Like I always equate it to farming. I love my garden. Like
Mm-hmm.
I love to play in the dirt. I like to eat what comes out of the dirt, which is very funny because I grew up in Los Angeles. But like this is my later life's passion. Yeah, I married somebody who totally grew up in farm country and he lived on a computer, but my father-in-law was fantastic and taught me, like, I was the kid he hoped his son would be, like, so he still got someone to play in the dirt with him. But when you think about farming, right, my son is studying this in like social science, classes right now. We're talking about how when they were switching from hunter gathering and started farming, people could make observations, right? I put seed in ground at a certain time, right? Certain amount of water, certain amount of sun, what things help grow well together, right? Giving the nutrients that they need. Like these are all observable facts. Like I love to pick people's brains about their like agricultural knowledge, right? I just think it's super fascinating. um, you may think, oh, that's just natural and whatever. That's science, baby. Like
Like that's
you're you know like you're still doing a thing, right? And that, I think that's beautiful. So there's, just like our brain, right, we were able to understand a lot more, and it's continuing and changing. And towards the end too, I kind of want to, I'll go back to my intention in a second, but at the end I really, I'm going to skip to the end of the chapter just for everybody's peace of mind, because I can know this, you're going to have to buckle up. It's a heavy story, but I'm okay. My mom's okay. There's still a lot of difficulty for sure, but there's a lot of really wonderful things that have happened in our lives, and I have some like I'm discovering some new healing techniques that like I'll go into as well. But anyway, intention wise too, my sharing this, and especially on your channel with your audience, right, is I really like the idea of making human connections. We all have very different experiences all around the world. And even in, I mean, the US is so vast with different experiences, and the reality is trauma doesn't see experience. It doesn't see what you went through. It does a thing to the brain the same way, regardless of what it was, and
so.
so,
To
sorry,
put
go
that
ahead.
in context, for people who may not realize this, like
Yeah.
I first started speaking publicly or talking. My first interview was over 20 years ago. And
Wow.
in that time since then, I have had survivors of child abuse, CSA, reach out to me because the trauma experiences and the way that trauma affects you, regardless of whether you were in a high controlled religious group or you were just in a high control group. And when I talk about the experiences that I had, they were traumatic. It was there was all of these crimes that occurred and transpired. But when I talk about those experiences, people relate to it
Yes.
because they experience similar. It might not be exactly the same. It's kind of like a parallel context. Is that what you're getting at?
Yes, absolutely. It's a really great example of this. I don't know if your audience has ever been familiar with Scientology, another high control group, you know, born in this country, right? But if you go watch some of their content, what's interesting, and actually same with Mormon content as well.
Mormons,
I watch all the
Jehovah.
things.
I have a whole list. Mormons,
Yes,
Scientologists, Jehovah's Witnesses. I've
correct.
spoken
Yep.
to ex-Hasidic Jewish people,
Hmm.
ex-Muslims,
Hmm.
um,
Yep.
ex-JWs,
And so, what I'm trying to do here is bridge
Baptists.
connections from all of these people. And it doesn't even have to be within a high control group. Sometimes your family structure can be like this. It could be anything. What we're really looking at, and my research background calls that systems, right? Systemic. Um, and hierarchies, right? Realizing that there are systems in play that have more power than others, right? And who's being marginalized or oppressed? What does that look like? All of that. So my intention is to build these connections with people, and I think a huge way we do that is through our survivor stories. Now, really important to note, you do not have to share your story to do that, to make the connection. It's a beautiful thing that we're all doing, but there is no expectation that all of us need to do that, or all of us need to do it in the exact same way. In fact, important thing about trauma informed care, the type of therapy that I'm certified in, is because sometimes, you come to a therapist and you're like, I don't want to talk about this. I don't want to talk about, I absolutely, there was periods of time where my disassociation, right, cutting my pieces of my brain away, shoving things away, suppressing them, memories, all of that. It's a biological process you do to survive the traumas, right? I had that so much that I couldn't talk about what was going on. It was just impossible. So,
Hmm.
trauma informed care helps a therapist, gives tools to sit with clients and work with them wherever they're at, even if they're not talking. And that's okay. I know that might be like, well, what does that look like? And I mean, y'all can go research that, but there's lots of ways we can address the nervous system, provide coping. I have sat with clients where I never learned their exact story, but I can look for signs of trauma and know, let me see if I can provide this healing, that sort of thing. I think that blows people's minds sometimes, because when they think of therapy, it's talk therapy and you have to be ready, right? And I think that kind of makes us a difficult place for people, because you can't meet them where they're at. And I think everybody deserves to have healing and support regardless of where they're at in life. If they could just calm their nervous system a little bit, have a little more sleep, some relief, I think everybody deserves that. So that's another part of why I like, you know, giving this information out to people. Um,
Hmm.
Now, my story is going to go into more of the evangelical world of Christianity. I'm no longer um, uh, practicing
So
in
you're an evangelical?
yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah. So
yeah.
here's my thing. There's like in this country, there's a lot of ways to do that. Like Bill Gothard is a whole nother thing in the IBLP world, and then there's like, you know, more Calvinist stuff going. There's like a lot of different ways somebody could do that. Mine will seem fairly mainstream to the edge of progressive, even in some circumstances. Um, I think that this gets touchy for people because this is the majority of America. We have some, even if we're not religious, because statistic, and this is just a science fact, more and more people are doing less religion, and that trend keeps going in that direction. However, we are America is a culturally Christian made country. However, we were founded to say we should do that separate. But if we're looking at systems, right, it's made up of people who have certain beliefs. We can look at, I won't comment on the political nature of things going on, but you can look at today's climate and see how that very much impacts the way people engage with their government.
Have you seen the I say little, but it packs a punch. Have you seen the documentary called For Our Daughters?
No, I saw you post about that.
It's
I'm
about
intrigued.
evangelicals.
Yeah.
And Jules Woodson is on that series talking about
Mm,
being a survivor and the consequences of speaking up.
yeah. Um, there's a lot of suppression that goes on in this religion group because it is a dominant power structure. And to the point where I was learning about, and if anybody's interested in like facts of religion, I'm not here to bust up anybody's faith, especially if it's a beautiful thing working for you. My mom is faithful, and we get along and love each other and respect each other. But um, oh gosh, what's Myth Vision podcast, YouTube
Mhm.
channel as well. He does really good work, and one of the things he talked about recently, I'm blanking on his name, guys, but sorry. Um, but he and I had similar um, callings, if you will, to that spiritual drive to. I wanted to be a pastor. I'll get into that later. Um, which is funny in the evangelical world. So we'll talk about that. But
Well, I
right,
wanted to be a preacher too,
I
so
have always been upsetting somebody. Even in the religion, I'm upsetting somebody. And now I'm out and I'm upsetting somebody. That's okay. It's fine. If you're not upsetting somebody, you're not risking enough. Um, and so he talks about in academia that people there are certain it's called the apostolistic timeline. And it's
Mhm.
basically the idea that the books of the Bible were written as firsthand witnesses to Jesus doing his things, right? It's like, I saw this and this is my thing. He goes through the actual, and again, we have tools of history and literature analysis. I mean, he goes through the whole gamut of why actually academically that's not supported. Like some of these books were written hundreds of years later, and they were all written at different times, which is fascinating. But anyway, he goes about how in academia usually you have a standard, right, of proving something, and you write papers and do research for your peers to review and reproduce and discuss, right? And so there aren't a lot of religious studies in America. It's not as a popular thing, which is kind of a shame. I loved it in school. It helped me understand my world a lot better and others. I wrote a paper on Mormon polygamy, and like it was fascinating. But they taught, they there are less of these secular universities doing religious work, and so they don't have the funding for it anymore. So if you want to go teach and this is your thing, you usually have to go into a church backed school, BYU, right? Notre Dame. Heck, I even did my master's at a Jesuit school, right? University of San Francisco. So like there's church backing, they have the money, right? But if you want to say teach about actual timelines and things that are in academia, they're like, oh, no, 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 we can't do that. You will lose your job. You will lose your interesting, right? So the systems that are
Well,
in power make a difference, right?
and it's always interesting how it goes back to the money. it's always about the money somehow. Somehow
Oh,
it's always about money, power, control, and manipulation, and also subjugation of certain people somehow.
mm-hmm. And you know what? That's a really good starting point into my story, Mary. There's going to be a lot of like moments where, and I spoke with my mom for a long time yesterday. Like it was fascinating. My mom actually consented. I said, Mom, would you ever let me interview you? And she was like, Oh, yeah. And so I was like, Awesome. I'm going to interview my mom.
Oh,
Um,
that's amazing.
right? Guys, this is even more amazing, folks, because I don't have a lot of family when trauma is like a wrecking ball sometimes through families. And I have a lot of biological people in my life and even adopted people in my life. But like my world of interacting is very small. So the fact that I have like my mom as this connection is very huge to me. You know, but anyway, the money and all that, I'm asking mom, hey, you know, people are going to want to know, how the hell does this happen? This is so illegal. This is so corrupt. This is so terrible. You know, why is nobody protecting kids? What's happening here? And she goes, oh, this is the way the world works. This is also, she talked about the timing of, you know, I'm a 90s kid, and like what the court systems looked like. And um cool part, I'm trying in the trauma, but I also have some like family law tidbits. My mom was a practicing lawyer. And I'll explain why that is amazing in and of itself. She's not practicing anymore, but she was a family law lawyer at one point too. um, and when my mom was in law school, so when you're in school, you can be on what they call law review. You write law review articles talking about particular issues. It's published through the university. Um, where did I put it? Oh, I think it's right here. This is, can you see that?
Yes.
So this
Yes.
is one of my mom's law review articles that I'm going to talk about. And so my mom was talking about, let's see, when was this written? 1994. This is cited all the time still, this review, in court cases, and other law review work, whatever. Um, my mom even was plagiarized, which was funny. She goes, yeah, this woman wrote basically word for word what, but I don't, she goes, but I don't own the copyright on it. The school does. So, anyway,
Oh,
flattering to be plagiarized, I guess. But, point being is the law, kind of like trauma, evolves with our culture, right? Our values, our systems of understanding. You know, just like you can kind of, I mean, it wasn't long ago in this country, women couldn't have a checking account by themselves. They
yeah.
couldn't have a credit card. They couldn't buy a home without co-signing. And I mean, bonkers, right? This is not long ago.
Mm-mm.
Um, this was my mom and some of those laws, you know, my generation too, and that's not long ago. So that's sort of to understand the protections for children and CSA survivors and all that. So anyway, we'll get into it. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna give you a little background about like the people that I come from. Okay. um my and I'm going to call my biological father my father. I'm going to use the term father, not dad. I don't, I think it's important. I really believe in concepts of chosen family, and that, you know, and I don't go with the biblical understanding of honor thy father and mother, like as I'm glad to be alive, but, you know, to love me like a parent, you can earn that, and you can definitely lose that privilege,
Yes.
right? So, and I really believe that children are a privilege, right? Like it,
Yes.
you know, they are precious and should be treated as such. My babies are my preciouses. So, yeah. So my father, um, he, let's see, he was born in Kansas City. My people kind of came, it's funny, both sides of my family kind of dates back to the Dust Bowl in that area where people, a lot of my people migrated um, to a lot of people of Southern California. So, but I had family kind of in that Missouri area, and a grandfather, I think he lived in Kansas for a while. Okay. And anyway, my father's family, his dad served in World War II, um, and saw a lot of really heavy combat. Um, and I think it's widely recognized trauma can come with combat, for sure. They also had, long lines of poverty. And when you struggle and you're poor, and you're trying to make ends meet, that also comes with a lot of trauma, higher rates of violence and child abuse. So my father and his two sisters were beat very terribly, abused, CSA, um, all all kinds of things, right? I'm just painting a picture. They had, um, a pretty typical evangelical background, that sort of thing. Any following so far? Good. Okay.
Well,
So, my
so
mother, yeah.
sorry, I had to unmute. But like when you talk about like the consequences of, not having food security, not having housing
Hmm.
security, those are some very basic fundamental needs of humans
Yes.
around the world. And it
Yeah.
negatively impacts the most vulnerable people the hardest. And that would be like your children.
Women,
And so
children.
that's,
Hmm.
yeah, women and children. Like, so that's where, like, when we talk about collectively, when I say that we collectively have a responsibility to provide safety, that means communities. That means all of us. If we are adults in the environment and we see something, like, we have a collective responsibility.
It doesn't have to be you to care. It doesn't have to affect you to care. Um,
Hmm.
I think we would need to do a lot of work on empathy in this country in particular. Um, and a big way that you grow empathy is by educating and communicating, which is what we're doing.
Yes.
Yay, us. So, yeah, I just realized too, if you're wondering what the heck's on my lap, this is a croissant pillow. I was watching this show, and somebody talked about, it was a baking show, and somebody talked about an emotional support croissant. And I had said, "Oh, that sounds amazing. I need that." So, like the next day or so, my husband comes, opens a box with this, and he's like, "I got you an emotional support croissant." And I was like, "That's amazing." So I named him Bruno, and he's really comfy. So anyway, Bruno's holding my notes. So just I realized, oh, that's on the camera. It's probably like, what the heck is that? Um,
That's amazing. Thank you for
yeah.
sharing that.
And a trauma tidbit here, it's a really good idea having fidgets, something that you can, um, it helps the brain kind of regulate too if you have something to do, right? I tried knitting for a hot minute. I wasn't good at it. I would be a terrible pioneer woman. I got a B in home ec, and that was generous. And so, like, but it's a good idea. Like, I have a basket full of them in my office, but I have like a basket full of different kinds of things too.
Hmm.
So play with them, and they don't have to be expensive. I think now that like they're kind of popular, and you can get really
Yeah,
expensive ones. One of the ones I have is a baby toy. It's like $4, and it's really good. People love that
that's
one.
amazing.
Yeah.
So
So
then, did you have any siblings?
yes. So my mother comes from, um, I think it's important to understand kind of my mom's context. I'm not going to go too much into her story, but I want you to know I have her permission to share. Um, my mom's parents, my grandmother was very, very unhealthy, had she had agoraphobia really badly. a lot of mental illness. She would go in and out of hospitals all the time. A lot of drug seeking behavior. So she was very addicted to pills, and would just be seeks medical. It was very easy at the time to get doctors to prescribe you whatever if you said something owied. Oh, I'm hurt, my back, whatever. And so my mom said that her mother was pretty much just gone, like a lot of the
Mhm.
time. She just very chronically, and she was a smoker, and has burned a house down, and she falls asleep on these pills with lit cigarettes. And she said one time her kids, like my brothers, or her brothers, were like trying to put out the flames, and she woke up and was like annoyed at them, like, what are you doing? I
Oh
was
my
awake.
God.
Yeah. So you can kind of get a picture. My mom's father, my grandfather, was horribly abusive, um, and a lot of CSA happened to my mom. Now, what's interesting is my mom, so what he was also really physically violent with his children, and there was an incident where they were playing Monopoly, um, and he went ballistic and started punching my mom's little brother. Just couldn't, like, he was all bruised and bloodied up, and my grandmother kicked him out of the house, and they're having this family meeting later on saying, well, should we welcome dad back? And my mom, she was 14 at the time, went into hysterics, just saying, no, 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 you cannot let him back in the house. And she said, well, tell me why. Tell me why. Now, to be fair, my grandmother had actually observed, she caught him abusing my mom a few times, but she was in such, this is a delusional state of like, no, that's not what that was. She didn't want to deal with it. Right. So she failed to protect. Okay. Um, which actually is a thing that can get you in legal trouble now. Like, if you're, even if you're not perpetrating the abuse, if you're the parent who's not protecting, that is a
Yes.
crime.
And I want you to know that what the reason that my mother was arrested and prosecuted was for
Mm-hmm.
failure to aid a victim or protect a
Mm-hmm.
child.
Protect the child. Yeah. And
Yeah.
as a mandated reporter, that's something. And I've had to, I had a client whose mom invited, wouldn't get the abuser out of the house. So she effectively made a choice between abuser and her daughter. Um, so that happens. So basically, she's like, tell me why. She's like, I'm not talking to you about it. She told an aunt. Aunt told mom. They freak out, but because the aunt knows now, they end up calling the police. Um, and grandfather goes to prison. He tries to unalive himself in prison. And so that he's put in a locked psychiatric facility. And my mom was put on the witness stand at 14. And back then, too, I still think we could do a lot better. But I've gone with clients when to court when they face their abuser and stuff. I did it with a young adult client not that long ago, about a year ago. And so it's very different. But basically, my mom had to sit in the little stand box right across from her father and stare at him while he's like glaring at her. And my mom said she just totally like compartmentalized, disassociate, answered the questions, and he went to prison, or this lock facility, right? Um, well, for a while, she shuffles around to different houses while um, my grandmother's in and out of psychiatric facilities and things like that. Finally, grandfather comes back and they're living all together again. My mom is 17. Right? This, like, they're living together again. So my mom said, So my mom had to pretty much, she took care of and raised her younger brothers. And she also had to take care of her own self, figure things out. My mom ended up getting a job. She lied about her age, got a job because they couldn't feed themselves. Like sometimes relatives would call a charity and they'd drop off groceries, but like the power, the water would get shut off. They like, it's
It just,
survival, right?
yeah, you're in
Barely.
survival mode at that point. You
Hmm.
have no, and then like for your mom, like as a person, as a child, like, so some of the
My mom
consequences
was
of that,
never a child. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
don't get to be a child. You are literally fighting to survive. And she
Yeah.
didn't get to have that safety
She
to.
My mom loved her little brothers, and like, she became a little mom. And I think that story is very common in these kinds of families and across a lot of faiths too,
Parentification of children.
especially girl children taking care of other children, right?
Yes.
So she anyway, at 17 they're all living together. He beats my mom really, really badly, like punching her in the face. My mom was so cute. She goes, I had these really cool styling glasses that I bought myself with my own job money because, like, my parents aren't going to buy me glasses. And I was pretty nearsighted. And he broke my glasses. Um, and then, and my mom, by the way, like, slept with a knife under her bed. This is like just real, like you had to fight. And she basically said to him at one point, so like the next day ran into him, he's like, here, I fixed your glasses. And my mom, all of a sudden, like, got her voice big. And I tell this to people all the time, your voice can shake, you can be scared, but you can also speak your truth, right? And she got big and she said to him, you will never touch me again, and you will never touch my little brothers again. If you do, I am sending you back to prison, and you know how you liked it the last time, what you tried to do to yourself. So you will not touch us again, or that's where you're going. And my mom said he sat in the chair and his eyes just bugged out. My mom said he never touched her again. And
Good for your mom.
6 months later, she moved out. Um, but here comes my story pretty soon after that, because, trauma, you think, I've left this bad thing, right? And
Mhm.
now I am the boss of me and my life, which, yes, but you need
Yes.
to know what you're
But
working with. You need to know what you're working with.
you need to understand yourself. And,
Yeah, yeah,
it's not as simple as just you reach safety or you accomplish safety or you think you're in a safe place. That's when the real work of trauma
right,
recovery, really the long-term work begins.
right. And it can still always surprise you. I just know, even to this day, it'll surprise me all the time. But I just know that I can take the surprise. I know what that is. It's like a non-surprising surprise, if that makes sense. Like, I'm not floored by it anymore. I go, oh, okay, that's happening. You know.
Yeah.
And people around me and who know me know what that is. Like, I had an interaction the other day with my husband where he was cooking, and doing some stuff. And in our family, my husband is a fantastic cook. And so anyway, he like went like this to like move me out of the way of the pantry. And I had a little trauma response and was like, "Wah," you know,
Oh,
and he goes, oh, it's okay. Like, he knew. And it was funny because my mom was standing there too, and I guess we were both in his way, so my mom and I were doing the same thing.
no, this is
And
an
he was like, what is
unexpected.
happening? Sorry guys, sorry, everything's cool, you know. And so
Was
it can catch you by surprise.
you can think you're in a comfortable, safe place and
Yeah,
you're
that's okay.
relaxed, and then you're just like shocked. You're like,
Yeah.
oh my God. Yes.
Yes. So anyway, my story really comes with my mom basically meeting my father, and there's an age difference there. My father has been married before. Before he met my mom, I know he was married twice. And he has, I have an older half sister. Um, and there's like a whole backstory to that. I haven't spoken with since I was in college. Ironically, she's a therapist too. But anyway, my, she's like 12 years older than I am, I believe. But anyway, she was 9 years old when my parents got together. My mom was 21 when she got married, so not long out of her hellhole of a home. She never went to college, basically, and this was an attitude common, especially among the time and poor people and patriarchy, right? And my grandmother told my mom, "Well, college is for to find a husband, but that's for rich girls. We're not rich, so you're gonna have to figure that out." So I think there was something. My father had money, which also he didn't grow up with. But I think, and not on a greedy level, but if you come from like being hungry, having money is a great comfort, right? And like one of the trauma things that my mom will still do, we always tease about, like, "Mom, how much grocery do you really need?" Like she would pile, and she goes, "Baby, this comes from being hungry, like, all the time. I never want to feel that again, right? I want to make sure I always have food in the fridge, right?" So I get that.
Sometimes
Um,
you need to relax your nervous system, your central
yeah.
nervous system when it's hyperactive because of the fact that you've experienced so much food insecurity. What she's
Mm-hmm.
doing is she's soothing her central nervous system. And it makes complete sense when you consider it in that context.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Snacks help. Um, so basically, I think we talked about disassociating before, but I
Yes.
just want to say that a lot of times there's this was a huge, huge thing for me. So when I tell you about my abuse story, um, I actually, as a teenager, had to be kind of told, and I'll go back into that when it's appropriate, but that I was abused because I did not know. I had disassociated so much. And I also just really didn't remember things, to the point where when I was talking to my mom last night, there was one thing she said to me, and she looked at me like, seriously, and she goes, "Kristen, do you not remember, like, us doing this?" And I said, "No." And I was like, what, 14? Yeah, 14, 15, somewhere around there. And I said, "No, I don't remember that at all." And she goes, "Well, I'm not surprised because this was disclosing the abuse kind of to me in a therapist's office. And I completely, like she said, I've never seen you like that. You completely just fell apart, you know?" And so that's kind of me. And there's times, and disassociation, by the way, people, to understand it, it's sort of like letting your brain go to somewhere else while something bad is happening, so that you can survive, right? Your brain is trying to protect itself, and it knows that is too much. That is too much adrenaline. That is too much, right? It's dangerous, right? And so, what's interesting is if you flip that switch, um, it doesn't know, it's kind of like faulty wiring where it doesn't know how to turn off. And so I would forget, this is a very common trauma symptom, forget time, like not have a awareness of, oh, I missed the school bus again. I missed the school bus again. Like that was my life, missing the bus. And my mom being like, "Are you serious?" Like, I would lose things all the time. I still joke that like I need tracking on my phone and my beverages because I never know where they are. Um, things like that. Um, so your where trauma happens in the brain back here is you've heard of fight flight. Other things people do are freeze or fawn. They get all kind of Um,
What
but
about like responding in shame? Like, are you
Mhm.
familiar with Dr. Janine Fisher, who talks about the shame
Yes,
response?
yes, yes, and it's sort of similar-ish in freeze fawn. There's a very people tend to get really big or really small, and a lot of you see it a lot with children who were abused. Like you're trying to get small, not noticed. You don't want people to like you don't want to be noticed because you don't want to be put in the situation again to be harmed. Yeah. So your frontal lobe here is the one that does all the higher reasoning and the thought. And when that part, the back part of your brain, the trauma brain is going, this part just goes, nope, not happening. So that's just something to kind of understand. So as a baby, I was dedicated. Um, it's interesting because the religious part of my life early on was not that big a deal. I didn't even know that I was dedicated till when I became more religious. I asked my mom, like, all right, so I'm wanting to join this church and whatever, mom. What, like, have I been baptized? What's the deal? And she goes, oh, well, the church that I went to at the time, like, they didn't do baptism, they did dedication. So some groups, like, and so I don't need to get overly biblical. You can look up all the differences, but some groups don't believe in baptism till you can consent and like say it's a thing for me.
Oh, like Anabaptists.
Yeah. And non-denominational, which I always laugh at that name because why are you calling yourself not a denomination when you're a denomination? But anyway, it's like here's my non-label label. Um, so I don't
But
know.
also, like, if like a core tenet of Anabaptism is to not believe in infant baptism,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So
then
other churches will say, no, you can do the baptism thing, but it's the confirmation of I am agreeing with my baptism and now I am joining as a full member. However you slice and dice it, right? It's here I am as a baby, like with some religious intention, right? Anyway, so apparently I was dedicated. No idea until later. I went to church with my mom, like, holidays, and I think she just liked putting us in Easter outfits and stuff. Um, like we saw, it was the 90s, so we sometimes looked like upholstery. Like we had big flowers and things. It was, oh, so bad. My mom there's this great picture. If my
I'm
mom will let me
sorry.
post it one day, my mom had matching dresses with us, and we literally look like drapery. It's so bad. um,
What a delightful time to have grown up.
yeah, right. It was fun.
Such the height of fashion, right?
Yeah, yeah, and big heavy bangs, and um,
Oh my god. Oh my
um.
god.
So my mom I learned this one last night, and some of the stories apparently I had to relearn because even though I'd been told it, I like forgot it because I was like, oh, I don't need that memory, thanks. Um, but this is a different me, right? Every time we get older and wiser and grow, our brain can actually process and look at things a little different, and that's pretty cool. And
Mhm.
so my mom tells me when I was probably a year and a half, my sister and I are 19 months apart. And by the time I came along, my mom said she was pretty sure I got to get the heck out of here. My father would beat her. She's woken up unconscious on the ground several times. She didn't. sometimes people don't understand the concept about marital RAPE. Um, but that is absolutely a thing. For a lot of abusers, there it's not sexual. There may be a component of sex involved, but usually this is about dominance and power and wanting to have that over other people. And it can be really, there's lots of different ranges of malevolence there, right? And my father is it's the worst type of narcissism. Donald Trump is one. Many mental health people have come out in recognition that this is a dangerous, I'm not trying to be political. I'm talking about real scary mental health issues. Like, these are people who rise to power and do scary things. My father was one, and it's called malevolent narcissism. If you want to look up, they'll like list people in history who probably had that
No,
diagnosis. Yeah.
the irony. Okay.
Oh.
This is my opinion. Okay. I will never, ever vote for somebody who embodies and speaks in a way that reminds me of the people that committed horrendous crimes against me. And his
Yes.
words are almost verbatim, to some extent, some of the words that these abusers used.
Yes. I've
So,
heard that.
why do we continue to promote people or to put people in positions of power? And again, this is my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
You can do what you need to do, but this is my opinion. Why do we continue to put people in positions of power
Mm-hmm.
that have shown us who they are?
Yeah.
Like, if you've ever heard of Maya Angelou, and I do love Maya Angelou,
Mm-hmm. Me too.
believe people when they show you who they are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And for the people who think that, oh, this is a profit, abusers will use every tool in the book to manipulate and abuse and to show how much power they have. They're about power, control. They use money to get there. It's always about the money. It's always about power.
Mm-hmm.
It's always about dominion and
Absolutely.
manipulation. Thank you.
That has been Mary, everyone. Oh my goodness. Yes. Yes. Yeah. It's interesting being able to hear the voice of someone from your past in something now. If you never believed in a warning sign, right? And it gets your body and your system going, warning, warning, danger. Yeah, I had all kinds of danger vibes there too. Um, but yeah, that was my father too. And he also had a lot of money. I later found out that this was very shady money. He was a chiropractor, and I put that in quotes because it is sort of unclear whether or not he did schooling. What he did do was a lot of fraud, like insurance fraud and different things. He had a super shady office in not a great neighborhood in Los Angeles, and there's like barbed wire and whatever. And I would constantly see these like shady deals go down as a kid, and I'm like, what is happening? My mom said she walked in once and he had a floor safe that she didn't know was in the house, and there's like cash everywhere. She was like, my mom literally screamed, what the hell is this? Because she's like, never seen so much money at one time. And he was like, get out of here. He was really shady. Um, Side note about the money and the power stuff, he got busted by the federal government, and he was facing some hefty prison time for the things that he had done. But in systems of power, the government made a deal with him. If you roll over on some people, will reduce your sentence. And so he went away for tax evasion, not all the other stuff. And he went to prison for an itty bitty amount of time. He is now in another state. I keep track of where all these people are. He's still alive. Is somehow allowed to help people get Social Security. Don't ask me how that works, why that is allowed. Maybe it isn't. I don't know. All I'm saying is there are systems of power that keep people in power despite what they do wrong because we believe them to be more important. He has never faced any time for abusing, at least I know of abusing 3 daughters, probably the 4th. I've never met her, but never faced any time for any of that. Not to mention all the partner abuse. Okay. Anywho, my mom saw him as when I was a baby, beat me. I was like a year and a half, and he grabbed me by the leg and like punched me really hard, and I had bruises on. So my mom, it's interesting. My mom is really good sometimes in the moment. She goes, I'm going to fall apart later. My mom has by the way, humor, sometimes people get uncomfortable with. I make a lot of like sarcastic jokes and stuff. Mary and I love connected on the fact that we use sarcasm a lot, but, it's a healthy coping mechanism. I'm not minimizing or like, not dealing with the fact that it's a serious situation. I know I lived it. I'm just, that helps a levity, and that is considered healthy.
Yes.
But my mom took pictures, and she said, back in the day, you had to develop them. So she goes, I went a couple towns over to develop them under a fake name, so that I could have them. And she, at some point, had kicked him out of the house, and she's giving me a bath, and I'm like, somewhere between 2 and 3, maybe 2. And I talk about, and because I'm little and I don't even know that what I'm saying is bad or anything that was wrong. But I asked if Daddy was coming home, and she said, nope, he is not coming back to this house. And I said, oh. And then I said, well, when Daddy gives me a bath, and I started to name physical body parts and functions, sexual functions that happen to male body parts. And my mom said, what? You know, and, asked some clarifying questions to make sure she heard accurately. And then she called the police because you would think that's what you should do, right?
Yes.
So they they gave her a tape recorder and tried to get him to confess something to her. Hey, Kristen said this. What is this about? Well, kind of really bad timing. He had a series. He constantly was having affairs, and my and again, it was a power thing. It was just like, if I could have somebody, then I could. I learned years later, apparently, I had a long term male partner, which he was incredibly homophobic. I found that fascinating. Um, anyway, um, but apparently he was with somebody at the time. So my mom said she could hear a woman like laughing, and so it didn't, that recording didn't work out. Anyway, 2 years go by where he never asked to see us, never asked to, never asked for anything. My mom said the divorce took a long time because money and like settling the money. And she said, yeah, basically all that money went to just paying off lawyers to try to finish the divorce, right? Um,
Uh-huh.
my mom had to borrow so much money just on lawyers. And so my mom said she just sort of held fast for like 2 years and hoped he would just not come back and want to see his kids. Um, never called, never asked about us, never wanted anything. And my memories of this time, it's funny because I actually have some happy remembering my first home, um, with my mom and my sister. And I was sharing some funny stories and stuff with my mom, like things I remembered. And then 2 years go by, and she suddenly gets court paperwork saying he wants to see the kids. Um, how about I come pick him up, right? And my mom's like, oh no, hell no. And apparently what had changed is he got a girlfriend. Every time there was a girlfriend, and this is not a judgment on age difference or whatever, but every time it was somebody younger and younger, right? He really liked women in their 20s, despite his getting older. And so there's this young girlfriend, right? And suddenly now he has an interest in where his children are. So they go to the court system. They do, and I'm making a very lengthy process as short as possible, but they go through, it's basically what they call like evaluations, right? They do them today. Um, Not always great. It very much depends on the state. Um, I really feel like there are certain places that states' laws make sense, right? Where local systems, maybe like the needs of that population could be very different, right? Things like natural resources, traffic patterns, housing, that stuff makes sense. However, when we're talking about laws that protect, or laws that give like medical access, or we're talking about laws that um, give rights, right?
Hmm.
Guarantee rights. I don't think that is a state by state issue, right? If we are saying, what's discrimination, that is not a state by state issue. We need to get together on that. And I think that's where, when we build empathy, those things become more possible. But anyway, the court things that were going on at the time are very reflective of the time. But basically, they're doing these evaluations. A lot of times, they're social workers. They're like, interviewing parents, all that. But basically, my sister, my older half sister, um, what was interesting is she never wanted to go to visit with him. And the only times that she would want to go, my mom said, is when her brother and sister, who are not his biological children,
Hmm.
but this was a marriage that was took place, and she had two children from a previous marriage, and so he kind of, like, he knew them and grew up with them. She only wanted to go with them. She felt safer. When she had to go alone, she was terrified, and no, don't make me go, don't make me go. So anyway, my mom said it was interesting because she showed all these signs of like something's not right, but nobody asked her. Um, and so, because of my caseworker um, doing the investigation she was doing, she asked my older sister what had happened. And her mother, which by right she was allowed to be with, her mother sat there, and I guess she was really, really afraid. This happens a lot of times when you say, well, why don't kids tell? Well, there is a lot of fear, a lot. There is fear of what's going to happen to me. There's also fear, even if you love the other parent, she loved her mother. Um, I don't be in trouble, because they're told sometimes you will be in trouble. Your mom will not like this. Someone will not believe you. And then those things sometimes actually happen. Someone doesn't believe you. Someone doesn't, is mad at you, right?
Hmm.
So she tells not everything, but enough to the caseworker. And she also tells the caseworker, I've seen him molest my sister, Kristen. I was 3 years old at the time, and I saw him do this to her. And then she talks about a few times he did some things to her. So they, yeah, go ahead.
Well, then the other thing, there's also one of the reasons that kids don't tell also is there's a lot of shame.
Yes.
You feel dirty and ashamed. I just
Yes.
wanted to point that out too.
Especially if you come from a place or a culture where you are reserved, right? You don't talk about things to do with the body, physical acts of love. You don't, right? You have modesty, purity culture, all of that going on. It heightens the shame level, right? And it puts, because purity culture and modesty culture, right, covering up, being pure, all of those things, those values. And I'm not saying as a judgment, I'm saying as a cause and effect relationship, those expectations end up, um, they put the responsibility of purity and the responsibility of modesty on the person, right? On the girl. She is supposed to remain those things. So when something happens to her, it is her, she's interpreting that as her fault, and often told and made to believe that it is her fault, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, thanks for that. Um, so um, I didn't know this until and know this, I may have forgotten and relearned it. My mom told me yesterday I became a ward, basically a ward of the state. Like you go to what's called dependency court instead of family court. And basically, neither of my parents had custody of me. I wasn't in foster care system. I was in my mom's care, but the court is the one who's going to make the decision about me. So, in a nutshell, my mom was told by the court system, you're very lucky that you still have your kids. You at least called the police and got this going. Otherwise, you know, you could have taken them. We could have taken them.
Right. And you know, I want to point out that even in the 90s, like it took a large amount of courage for her to stand up for her kids. And
Oh yeah.
that's something that is so difficult to do, but also like the state would have taken custody had she not taken steps. So understand that in that case, if I understand the courts correctly, when they do that, what they're doing is they're saying the parents are incapable of providing safety, and now they're going to remove the parents' ability to maintain
Yeah.
like decision making about their children because they have not displayed the capacity to create a safe environment for their children.
Yeah. So the other thing that happens in these cases is what they call supervised visitation. And so the fact that, so my father comes back, he basically, and this happens a lot in evangelical and lots of different cultures, but it's a using of women to fit a kind of fit a patriarchal family narrative of a happy family and what needs to be for a happy family. The idea that you have a mom and a dad, and the mom is available to raise the kids, a dad is breadwinner. It's very a specific family structure. And I'm not disparaging that if that's someone's chosen structure. However, that gets held, and it did at this time for a court system, even in the 90s, but it was held as this gold, beautiful standard. And if you were unable or unwilling to provide that structure, it didn't look as good, right? So my
Mhm.
father would he uses women to say look, I found me this, woman who wants to love on these children, and she stays home and she will take care of them. Mom is never home. So my mom started going back to school. My mom's way for freedom, she figured, and security for herself and for her children was education. She said, I am going to, even if I have to sink money into this and borrow and pay it back. And I tell people all the time, there's so much power in education, and education doesn't need to look the same for everybody. I'm not saying everybody go to university and study philosophy and right. It can look different for people. It could look like educating your own self, right? But there's power in that. And so my mom at the time had been going to school. My mom put herself through community college. And we're jumping ahead in timeline, but she transferred to UCLA, where she graduated magna cum laude, highest honors. She spoke at her graduation, and she talked about her daughters at her graduation. It was one of those defining moments for me. It was funny. Everybody like turned and looked at us, like it was, and I remember that as a kid being like, there. It was a kernel of hope, and I'll get into that. But my father was very abusive to me as, you know, calling me stupid and belittling my intelligence constantly. So, even to this day, I can get imposter syndrome a little bit about like, am I really smart? Am I whatever? And like, my mom will be upset if I don't mention this. I am really smart. um, I also graduated from UCSB, which is my university, with highest honors, magna cum laude.
Mm-hmm.
I also graduated with the highest GPA in my department, um, and distinction in my major. I had Queer Scholarship Award and grant funded research. I did a lot of nerdy things, guys. Uh, but why do I say that is not to toot my own horn, because it is a giant middle finger to my abuser. I am smart, and I'm smarter than you. Your daughter is smarter than you.
You
So
have to be smart to survive.
you
Um,
do. Yeah. Yeah.
we're going to have to wrap this up shortly. We've been going for about an hour, but maybe you can come back if you
I
have
would love
more,
it. Yeah.
because there's a lot in the document that you sent me that we still haven't gotten
Oh,
to.
yes, there is. And let me see if I can find like a spot in childhood. That way, like we can get to the bigger stuff. But basically, I ended up with supervised visitation of people who then were also abusive in themselves. And they lied to court systems saying because he was paying these social workers, he was paying these people to do the visits. And so they write these long reports about how my father and his girlfriend love these children, have nothing but the best of intentions, and they can take care of them. And then she would write these negative reports about my mom, and what she was doing. However, my mom said she never met with me. She never observed me with you ever. What she made the report on, she made it like it was a firsthand account, but she was taking the information that your father was saying to them and put that in her report. There was, yeah.
That's just another thing that people who abuse others do. They manipulate. And they don't just manipulate their victims, they manipulate people around them. They create this public image,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to the court system. They create this public image. And if you believe in the nuclear family and you think the nuclear family is this very positive thing, then you have that power. If you're the judge in that position of power, or you're the social worker that believes in that, or you're the evaluator at that point, like how does that actually, like, are you examining your your bias. Are
Mm.
you considering that perhaps you might have a blind spot when it comes to actually considering the welfare of the child that you have been entrusted to provide feedback on?
Mhm. Mhm. Yep. Yeah. And so a lot of things got missed. Um I mean, we were ultimately allowed to do uh the last judge, the judge that changed everything, um was friends with one of my father's lawyers. That lawyer,
Mhm.
my mom said, had a bumper sticker that read, I don't need to be a good lawyer. I know the judge. Ironic. Ironic. So this judge then told my mom, I am granting, and she said, Mom's not going to like this. My mom was awarded custody, but dad is getting every other weekend overnight unmonitored visits, and Wednesday, every other Wednesday. And I am granting it as of today, this Friday. He can go pick up the kids from school because I don't want mom to have a chance to talk to the children. And I am telling you, and he said to my mom, one day, this is a good man, my father. If he wasn't before, he is now. He's a good man. And one day your children are going to resent you and be angry with you because you kept their father, a good man, from seeing them all this time. So that stops today. They get to have their father.
Uh-huh. Because we're really going to grow up and be angry at our parents who remove the people that are harming us and committing crimes against us against our will as children and taking our bodily autonomy from us and
Yeah.
causing so much trauma. We're really going to be angry that our parents like
Yeah. So I'll leave it at that dot dot dot. But my whole world changed again for the worse because of that judge's decision to let my sister and I stay overnight in his house. Um,
yeah.
and my that ride is wild. It involves more CSA, a lot of emotional manipulation and screwing with your head. I think that sometimes gets not like not talked about enough, is that there's like screwing with your head and what's real and what's like, he did a lot
Yeah.
of that. Also, I was poisoned by my father. um, like my mom had taken me to the doctor and I was getting mercury poisoned. um, so there's a lot, guys.
And
So we'll do that.
thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you so much for talking about this and also talking about what trauma actually is.
Mhm.
And we'll definitely have to have you come back to continue on
I would
talking
love
about this.
to. I would
Um,
love
it
to.
might be a while, but we'll get to it, right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, just because my schedule is kind of full, but
Yeah.
I wanted to thank you so much for coming and talking about this difficult topic and for diving into like some of the systems at play
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
these systems really matter and people in these systems have power to make a difference. So how they use that power matters, right?
Absolutely.
And if there's anybody listening who has experienced similar or any of the things that you talked about, what would you say to them today?
Oh, you don't get to pick what you're working with sometimes, what someone did to you. Um, but you're the one holding the bags now. You're the one responsible for your life. And if you can't, I tell this to clients all the time, if you can't hold light at this moment for yourself, right? You can't even see the concept of a light, right? Hope, anything like that. Find someone else who can hold it for you, and you will be able to pick it up again. You just need
Ah,
to wait for that moment, right?
yeah. And
Yeah.
thank you for that, because one of the things that I personally do is sometimes I have a little book that I write to myself. I
Hmm.
write to myself now, in the present, in the future, in the past, all of the things. But the other thing is sometimes I go people watching. And
Hmm.
if you people watch enough, you will see people. If you are specifically looking for it, you will eventually see people showing kindness and empathy to one another. And that's one of the ways that I hold on to hope specifically.
I love that.
Another thing that sometimes you can do too is go out and volunteer for
Hmm.
organizations that are seeking to assist people that are unhoused, people that are struggling with food insecurity. Right now, we've had this massive Hurricane Helene where
Mm.
people are in dire need. Some of the people that I personally know are experiencing difficulties, like they don't have electricity, they might be unhoused, their loved ones are unhoused, they have like they don't know where to go or what to do next. And so get involved. Go out and find somewhere the humanity and the shared humanity and see the empathy and compassion that humans are capable of.
Yeah.
And
I
also be
also
curious.
I also want to say too, if you know, a lot of trauma people experience is what we call relational trauma, meaning it happened in the context of people and relationship. So if you're one of those people that where you're at in your journey feels people feel a little unsafe and it's hard, maybe that's hard for you to do. We call it like borrowing someone else's nervous system, but go check out animals, right? Go even just at a shelter. Like there are places where they like need dog walkers. They need oh my gosh, that was my mom. Um we just commented, guys. So but you know what I mean? Like my dogs are so important to my nervous system, right? Go,
Mhm.
cats that you can cuddle with, anything. Or even just walking into a pet store or
Yeah.
like there's an adoption place in my local pet shop and I like go like say hi to the kitties, you know. So that's another way to do it, right? All creatures deserve kindness. So
Yes.
yeah.
That's really wonderful. Thank you again so
Mhm.
much. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you for being here. I look forward to having Kristen back to hear some more about some of what she knows about trauma. I'm so honored that we get to have this experience, and I want to thank all of our Patreon subscribers and everybody that has donated to the Misfit Amish to bring you this live stream today. We couldn't do this without you. I want to thank everybody who has listened to this. Um, really appreciate all of your support. Please, as always, like, comment, share, subscribe. I am your host, Mary Byler, and I'm here crocheting.